Deepika Padukone is among Bollywood's A-listers who appeared before the Narcotics Bureau in Mumbai today. Other actors were Sara Ali Khan and Shraddha Kapoor. These are some of the images that we got to see today. It was an unprecedented moment in some ways, because who would have thought that these kind of glamorous big stars would actually be brought before the Narcotics Bureau. But that said, the questions still remain, and the questions are this. How serious is the drugs probe? Is this all about stardust, or is it actually something that's going to get to the root of the matter? Is the investigation going to go beyond these big stars that you see on your screen, or is it going to be just about capturing a few headlines? And in the meantime, what happens to the forgotten Sushant Singh Rajput probe? Remember, as we talk about drug use in the country, that this is a country where 31 million Indians actually consumed cannabis in 2018. So the question before us today, one, is this drugs probe serious? And two, has the Sushant Singh Rajput tragedy been forgotten? And three, we've seen, as someone joked on Twitter today, television media interviewing cars and claiming exclusives. You've seen those car chases on our roads. What does it say about the state of the media, the way this story is being covered? I want to introduce a very distinguished panel today, and I'm going to bring them up now on our screen. We have with us many different people from different walks of life, and what I'm going to do is introduce them one by one. Welcoming to the program, Aryama Sundaram, senior advocate, one of our most prominent legal luminaries. It's a pleasure to have you, Aryama, on the program. Welcome also to the program, we have Abha Singh. Abha Singh is outspoken, pulls no punches. She's an advocate and a former civil servant. We're also welcoming to the program Bharti Pradhan. Bharti Pradhan has covered the film industry for many years, and I think knows it like the back of her hand. Also welcoming to the program Kaveri Bamzai. Kaveri has been one of our senior most journalists and one of our most acerbic writers. And also on the program today is Mr. Dipankar Banerjee. We keep all talking on behalf of the Narcotics Bureau. We actually don't talk to people who've actually done these investigations. So he's somebody who's actually been a senior former narcotics official, and he can tell us a thing or two about how serious this probe is and where it's at. Mr. Aryama Sundaram, I'll start with you, if I may. What do you make of where we are? These are, of course, unprecedented images, and many Indians are living through them vicariously. But that said, should we take this seriously, or is it all about a few dramatic headlines? How do you see it, sir?
We have Bollywood stars walking the NCB ramps. You know, it's almost like one of these fashion shows where you have them walking up and down. The entire issue really is that I'm for myself. What is the role of the NCB really? The NCB, as we all know, it is a Narcotics Control Bureau, which is funded by the government, which is funded by you, me, all us taxpayers. The purpose of the NCB is really to go into international, the of drugs, drug trafficking, drug peddling, to try to spot what the sources of these drugs are, put an end to all that. Certainly not the job of the NCB to find out whether Mr. X or Mr. Y is smoking a joint or popping a pill. That is not the job of the NCB. However, the NCB appears to have taken on this very artist task of finding out the stars. I noticed to date only the lady stars. I'm sure the men will follow enough. But the point of the matter is this. The way I would like to see it, and because I would like to believe in institutions and their integrity and their sincerity, and when I look at it that way, I would like to see it as the NCB has now come to know a huge amount of drug consumption in a certain sector, that perhaps what they're doing is making an investigation and inquiry with all these people to find out and trace the source of such drugs, where they're coming from, who are peddling drugs, who are trafficking drugs. Let's accept one thing. People who consume drugs or who are addicted to drugs, we can't really be punishing those people. They're not people who deserve to be punished. That's why even under the Act, the punishment is very lenient. It's very minor for people who are for actual consumption. They're people who need to be treated. What the NCB should ensure is that the supply of drugs should not be available to tempt people, including children, including youngsters, into this. Now, that is what the NCB should be doing. And like I said, I'd like to believe that our institutions have integrity and sincerity, in which case I'd like to see this in a different way. Perhaps the NCB is inquiring and investigating with all these people to find what is the source of the drug. To that extent, they're looking at them more as witnesses and not as accused, to find out what are the source of the drugs, where are they coming from, and going up the ladder, starting with the consumer, trying to find out whom they're sourcing from, then investigating with those people, and trying to find out finally where the drugs are coming in from. If it was not that, and if that's not the purpose of this exercise, then I think it's a tremendous waste of public money which is being done here, which means, Barkha, it's your money, and all of us on this panel, it's all our money is being wasted for this purpose. So I'd like to believe that there is a bigger purpose behind this.
So I think you had a great line, and your line was stars are now walking the NCB ramp. But Aryama, do I summarize you correctly by saying that if the probe does not go beyond the stars to the peddlers, to the suppliers, and to the cartel, then this is just a few moments of glamorous headlines for the NCB. You're saying the consumers, the trail can't end at the consumers, no matter how much salacious interest there may be in this story.
Absolutely. If it was that, then for NCB's moment of glory, you and I are paying a hell of a lot of money.
That's well said. And would you concur, Mr. Banerjee, as someone who's actually investigated cases like this? Some would say that this is Bollywood's worst kept secret that's now out in the open. Others would say this is not a serious probe at all. What would you say?
Frankly speaking, this case falls under Section 27. That is, those who consume opium. Those who consume opium are convicted charged under Section 27 of the NDPS Act. I have never investigated any NDPS case which has been charged under Section 27, because this is of consumers, and basically we have been mandated to make big seizures to catch hold of those who are actually supplying it to the peddlers and to the other peddlers and wholesalers, and these are small quantities on which the maximum punishment is 6 months. It's a bailable offense, and of course, if we come to know that someone is having this, we catch hold of him. Mm-hmm. But so far, I don't think any agency, neither CBN nor NCB, has booked, or they might have booked only hardly less than 1% of the cases is booked under the Section 27 of NDPS Act. It is very difficult to catch hold of a consumer who consumes opium or charas or ganja, whatever it is, and from them it is very difficult to find out who. Even they don't know who the peddler is, who has given them. It may be a friend who has given them. Again, you have to arrest that friend who has given them. The friend may not be a consumer himself or herself, but he must have got it from somebody else. There's a big chain, from the consumer to the peddler. At least 3-4 people are there, and it's not feasible. It's not possible. Until date, I have now never come across a case where a consumer has been arrested, and from that we have gone to the peddler and then to the wholesaler or the big smugglers. Till date, I've never come across such a case where a consumer has been arrested, someone who is consuming drugs, and from that person we have gone to we have caught hold of some big fish.
So would you say, Mr. Banerjee, that you don't quite concur with how your colleagues in the trade are handling this probe? Or would you say, as Aryama Sundaram has said, that it's too early to judge and we have to see where they land up eventually? Which one would you say?
I would say it is too early to judge. But frankly speaking, now they have arrested so many people, so many consumers, those who are consuming drugs. But they have not come across any big fish. They have not come, and I think only 2 peddlers also have been arrested, but only 59 grams of charas has been seized. Now, 59 grams of charas, that is a small quantity.
Right.
That's a very small quantity.
So let me take this to Aryama Sundaram, if I may, and then I'll open it up for the rest of the panel. Mr. Sundaram, you said that if this doesn't lead to cartels and big sharks, it's a waste of taxpayers' money. Yet you have a Riya Chakrabarti, who is, by the way, not even getting bail. So what do you make of actually what's going on? And are we in a situation where we are actually seeing the law enforcement agencies catering to public opinion, to the fact that there's such an outcry over Sushant Singh Rajput's death, of almost catering to what they think the public wants and expects?
Definitely, yes. Let's accept one fact that Riya Chakrabarti is being in jail today on a drug charge such as she has is absolutely, according to me, logically and legally ununderstandable. But the fact of the matter is this, that it started with a probe into a possible homicide. It started into inquiry as to money laundering. It started into inquiry as to siphoning of money. What started off there appears not to have gone anywhere. It appears to have hit a blank wall. And the only thing which has then come up is this NCB issue of her apparently having consumed and not even consumed drugs. The charge apparently is that she was getting drugs for Mr. the late Sushant Singh Rajput. And I find that very sad. What started as a Justice for Sushant campaign has now branded Sushant Singh Rajput as a drug addict who had all these people who were busy procuring drugs. Like he had these whole lot of people whose job was to get drugs for him. Now, that's very sad. And now if that is a charge against Riya, I'm afraid that's almost a knee-jerk reaction to what the public opinion has been, what the media reaction has been, because having decided that Sushant Singh Rajput had been wrong, they had to find someone who had wronged him. And that, unfortunately, fell on Riya. And what has then happened is that there has been a reaction to her, and this is what it's resulted. Can I just give you one analogy to this? I've always maintained that Hindu mythology teaches us a lot. You may have heard of what was known as the Brahmastra. The Brahmastra was an arrow which, when released, could destroy anything it went to. There was only one problem. The Brahmastra, after being released, could not be called back. It had to hit something and destroy it. It's like here, because of all the pressure that was brought up, the Brahmastra was let loose on Riya. Now, It couldn't hit any of the targets for which it was let loose, but it had to hit something. And I think that is what this arrest under the NCB of Riya is all about. Unfortunately, she was at the receiving end of a Brahmastra.
Very interesting. And Abha, you've been actually calling it a political witch hunt. Now, Mr. Banerjee is, of course, being a little more conservative. He's saying that, look, the quantity of drugs we're talking about is too small. We have to see where this probe actually goes. But how do you discount the huge sort of manic, almost national interest in this story at the cost of what's happening with the economy, at the cost of what's happening with COVID, at the cost of what's happening with farmers? Something is going on here, and there's a sense that law enforcement, courts, everybody's playing in a sense to that public expectation, that vicarious public expectation. Abha Singh, go ahead.
Absolutely right, Barkha. I think Sushant by Bihar police primarily because they thought of Bihar elections, and you can see Sushant's picture on the posters in Bihar that and we will not forget him. So something which started with a political connotation, and CBI was brought in because CBI could not reach anything. CBI for 1 month has not come to the conclusion that it was a murder, and that the lawyer of Sushant Singh's family has now taken a press conference yesterday and trying to blame the CBI. So in that, if you see, Mr. Banerjee rightly, when he talked of 27, I would like to go one step ahead. Even though no drugs were recovered on Riya, NCB has slapped 27A, which is financing illicit traffic. I would like to ask NCB, what traffic was she financing? What were the gains out of it? Did she earn any money out of it? If she was illicit, if she was trafficking drugs, where is the money? Nothing. Because you could not find any drugs on her, you put her under a second FIR, which was subsequently registered by NCB. The first is FIR, NCB could not arrest her, so they filed a second one that was arrested. So that is one issue, that you treat her as a trafficker. Secondly, I would like to say that here the bigger issue is no drugs have been recovered either from Riya Even if you come to the drug chats of Deepika Padukone and you are saying she was the admin, these circulars came in 1920. The drug chats are of 2017. So how does the circular of being admin of a WhatsApp group is relevant? Not at all. It's more of a TV channel's trial, and definitely because nobody wants to talk of COVID, nobody wants to talk of unemployment, nobody wants to talk of farmer issue, and Bollywood is the best thing to divert attention, and that is why it is all Bollywood shade. But again, I would like to say a message to the NCB through your today that Barkha, if NDPS talks of this, it also talks of a section called 58, which says that officers, if they indulge in a vexatious and unnecessary seizure, arrest, or detaining, then they too can be tried, and it provides for 6 months imprisonment. So let NCB know today is their day, but tomorrow when the case comes in the court, the lawyers like us are also going to raise this.
Okay, now here's the point, Kaveri. The point is that the lawyers of this program, whether it's Aryama, whether it's Abha, or officials, Dipankar, Banerjee, have made a technical argument, right? But the technical argument doesn't apply to the kind of mania that we've seen around this story. And, I've got a question straight away coming for the panel from Isha Mudgal, who's saying, why are all of these stars not filing defamation cases against the animal-spirited media channels? Why has Ria not sued them for defamation, who was proven guilty even before the law of the land said so? Now, do you find the film industry's response extremely defensive? For example, film director Anubhav Sinha has been tweeting all day saying even after Karan Johar issued a statement saying that his party was not a drugs party and he was being tried by the media, no one is rallying together. So has it in that sense exposed the fault lines in Bollywood? Kaveri.
I think, Barkha, there are 2 or 3 things here. One is that Bollywood was never united. It's always been a disparate group of people. It's not a monolith. It's a group of camps, cliques, production houses, various studios. Not everyone sees eye to eye on everything. And we've seen it before when big stars, bigger stars than even Deepika Padukone, have been accused of being pro-Pakistan, being accused of being fueling the intolerance debate. So I think what is interesting to me is that at some level, this is a taming of Bollywood. And I think Bollywood has put itself in that position because I think over a period of time, through this whole soft Hindutva, through the very nationalistic movies that were starting to be produced, through the whole selfie brigade that happened. Every time the Prime Minister called, everyone would jump to attention. Of course, it didn't happen when Piyush Goyal came to Mumbai when he wanted to discuss the CA and NRC, and the government didn't take too kindly to that. So I think at some level there is a taming of the industry. The industry is seen as the last bastion of some kind of upholding of secularism, not because the industry consciously practices it, but because it worships success. So the minute you're a star and your film clicks, it really doesn't matter what religion you practice. So I think at some level there's that. The fact that Bollywood has put itself in this position by allowing itself to be used. And whether it's an Akshay Kumar who interviews the Prime Minister, or whether it's an Amitabh Bachchan who endorses various campaigns of the government, remember, Bollywood has played ball with this government. So when this government wants to exercise even greater control,
not just with this government. Bollywood has been establishmentarian vis-a-vis any government. It's not particular to this government.
I agree, but I think the power of this government is that I think it wants to be the only storyteller in town. It doesn't want so many storytellers. It wants to tell one story. It wants to tell the story of New India. It wants to tell the story of, the meritocracy. It wants to tell the story where the poor outsider comes to this big bad industry and succeeds. It wants one narrative. It doesn't want all these many narratives by so many popular people. It wants one star. The other thing I want to quickly make a point, Barkha, before we forget, and I think you've made this point several times before, there is a certain misogyny which is at play. right? You can argue that only the women in the industry consume drugs, which I find extremely surprising. I mean, the
Yeah.
men are either doing exactly what the super there's such super patriots that they don't consume drugs. But I think that is one big problem here. And I think that therefore this kind of smear campaign that's going on. Remember, the female actors in Bollywood really survive on their brand value. They don't get paid as much as the actors do for their film roles. So
Yeah.
really, they make their money from brand endorsements. That's all they have. The minute you destroy their brand, they really don't have much else. So I think that's a very significant point to look at.
I think that's very, very interesting. And also your point, Kaveri, about Bollywood, sort of the cliques and the camps, actually coming back to bite it, its lack of being able to stand up, coming back to bite it. And I just want to take this back to Aryama briefly before I go to Bharti. I know she's been waiting. Aryama, you made a passing reference about there being only women. And I remember Fardeen Khan. I remember when Fardeen Khan was actually arrested for cocaine. He made bail in 5 days. Oops, there's a bit of an audio loop, but I'm hoping you can hear me. Go ahead, Arima. Yeah.
I can hear you. Yes, he made bail in 5 days. And like I said, I think there's no matter of doubt, as Mr. Banerjee also agrees, that consumption of drugs is really something which even the Act does not view as a very serious crime. It makes it bailable, it makes it a maximum 6 months imprisonment. Usually, it should really result in a fine and nothing more. The reason being that the consumer of drugs, a person who's habituated to these drugs, a drug addict, like I said, it is also a medical issue. It is not a thing of castigating someone. All right, you can always find fault. Why did they ever get into it in the first place? What brought them into it? All that's very good. But the fact is, finally, we have to feel sorry for those who are addicted to drugs and who have their whole lives ruined by it. So therefore, I'm saying it is a very, very minor offense. Consumption of drugs is not something which I would call an offense of moral turpitude or a serious offense or anything. It's a very minor offense. What is a serious offense is trafficking of drugs, smuggling of drugs, supplying of drugs, getting people into the drug habit. Now that is serious, and that is what should be investigated. So when you said Fardeen Khan was released in 5 days, I say certainly should have been. Certainly should have been released in 5 days. That does not mean that you're condoning either the use of drugs, consumption of drugs, or whatever else it is. But like I said, let's give it its place. And its place in the entire format is really the most minor place of all. The consumer of the drug, unfortunately, is a victim. Now that victim, by law, needs to be punished, but then he is a person who shouldn't be kept in jail for days and days on end. It's not so at all. That is where the issue arises about the quantum of drugs which are found on him. Now, you must also remember that in Fardeen Khan's case, I believe that drugs were found on him at that time. And an issue arose as to the quantum of drugs. Because naturally, if you're a consumer of drugs, but you have a huge quantum with you, then the assumption or presumption can be drawn that you're using it to supply others, in which case you're spreading it, which is something which I take as a different basis than consumption. And Fardeen's case, until they showed that it was a very minor quantity and only for consumption, so that became the issue, which is why he went to jail at all.
Okay, I want to go to veteran film journalist and author Bharti Pradhan now. And Bharti, the point is that Aryama and Dipankar and Abha are continuing to argue from the law, and the law has its place. But when Mr. Sundaram says that the consumer is a victim, the consumer needs rehab, the consumer needs intervention, that is not how the public is seeing it today. The public is seeing this as an entitled set of privileged, rich people who are having fancy parties and are doing this for recreation, and there's a kind of mass revulsion drummed up and also added to by the way TV is covering this story, right? So to the extent that people are now saying that Deepika Padukone's depression must have either been caused by drugs or would have been a fake story. We're even kind of being so ignorant about the way we're talking about mental health. It's pretty shocking. So, Bharti, I want you to come in here on the non-legal aspect. Do you believe this is an inflection point for Bollywood? Do you believe that in particular for the women, for example, there's a question from Indranil Roy. How come not a single male star has been summoned by the NCB? Why only the female stars? What are we missing here? Is this some hidden reaction to Ria's patriarchy message t-shirt? Ria Chakrabarti wore a smash the patriarchy t-shirt when she appeared before the NCB. Bharti, go ahead, please.
First and foremost, Barkha, I think what has been happening is this has been, like people say, a fishing expedition with a lot of red herrings thrown around. It started with nepotism, it went on to, being despotic, went on to call people murderers, went on to call people dons, then it talked of underworldlings. I mean, you name it, and in the last 2 months since June 14th, we've been hearing every kind of name being thrown at the film industry. So I think out of all these red herrings, maybe they're hoping one or two will catch, and then they will nail if there is a culprit around, then they will nail the culprit. But I'm just wondering, where are we going? Because this has completely gone away from Sushant Singh. What are we trying to say? If you're trying to malign an entire industry and say that, all of them are on drugs, poor Karan Johar, I mean, is he so stupid that he would have a party in his house? He himself is shooting it. He's shooting all the guests. He's taking clips and he's putting it out on social media. Credit him with some brains. Is the host of a party going to really be putting out a clip if it was a drug party as people are claiming it is? So I think, and then so I just think that it's a very soft target, and it's also it's just gone away from where it was supposed to be. I'm just wondering, I'm just waiting to see what the CBI will come up with, because I'm only waiting to see what the agencies have to say at the end of it. Because as far as whether it's a studio trial or the public trial, I don't give them any kind of credence. I give them nothing at all, because I think they tend to either deify these film people or they try to demonize them. Why do you have to go to two extremes? You'll go to a Shraddha Kapoor and an Aryama and a Sara Bhaskar and everybody else to ask them about GST, about 370, about CA, things they haven't been read about. You want them to talk about all that just because you want to star bite. Why are you deifying them that they can, and now you want to demonize the whole lot. So let's not swing between the two extremes.
Okay, now I want to ask Mr. Banerjee, Abha and Aryama a critical question that has come my way. I'm reading out criticism about me. Barkha Dutt is operating a public relations campaign for the accused. Is there anyone on the panel that actually seeks to hold consumers accountable under the law as required? And I'm reading this out for a reason. One, to show that we do take critical comments, but also the deeper question. This is the mood in large parts of the public, that the moment you try and have a complex conversation about the law, about consumers vis-a-vis peddlers, you're told that you're advocating. We are not here to advocate drugs use. We're just saying let the law apply. Mr. Banerjee, if you were leading this probe, what would you be looking for? And of course, if you were leading this probe in this environment. So I'll start with you, then Abha, then Aryama, to this critical comment about what we are saying on this program. Go ahead, Mr. Banerjee. Yeah.
I'll be very frank with you. I have spoken to a number of college students, and I've found that most of them have consumed ganja one time or the other. They have consumed, nearly most of the college students have consumed. Further, under Section 27, a person who consumes and has been arrested, he can be let off, he or she can be let off just by submitting a bond that they undergo de-addiction. Just by submitting this bond, they can be let off. Another point I want to make is that in the European Union, they are thinking of making this thing consumption of this ganja, hashish. Yeah. They are going to legalize it. Consumption of this narcotic drugs. They are going to legalize these things. Not only in the Scandinavian, European Union, also in Great Britain and USA. They are shortly going to legalize consumption of marijuana.
So
So I don't.
No, I'm just saying. I'll take the
Yes,
same
please.
question to Abha. We are not here to say please go and smoke up. We're not here to say go and smoke a joint. I think what we're trying to do is to step out from the noise and look at both the legal and the societal response to this. So Abha, to the person who is saying that you are advocating for these actors, you, me, all of us on this panel, what would you say?
So I would like to tell that person that as per 64A of the NDPS Act, it clearly provides immunity from prosecution to addicts volunteering for treatment. So when the act itself is soft on consumers of small quantity, at the same time the act of cartel, it says life imprisonment, it talks of 20 years imprisonment. So you have to make the difference for consumers, and also the mandate of NCB is to look into international drug cartels. I would like to ask NCB, how did you to Mumbai? Why can't you track the root of the cartels? Rather than doing that, you are coming to the helpless consumer when the act itself says that you can
Why
be
are you
held.
calling the consumer helpless? Deepika Padukone is not helpless. Riya
No,
Chakrabarti is
but
not
actually the
helpless.
act says
Why are you calling them? Why are you calling them helpless? See,
Barkha,
that is where there's a disconnect with the
Barkha,
public mood.
the NDPS
Why are you
Act,
calling them helpless?
the
Why are they
NDPS
helpless?
Act, the NDPS Act makes provision for centers. It says look to them as patients, provide them help, and that is what I'm trying to say. That it looks at it from that point of view, and you are trying to demonize them. Have you heard Deepika Padukone talked of a depression, which you said in the honest? But my question again is here that why can't you catch the cartels? Not the peddlers you've caught. You've got absolutely minimum drugs you've seized, because how do you send it for sampling? Without any sample, how do you prove that they were taking drugs? Today, Deepika, Shraddha, all of them have denied taking drugs. I want to ask NCB, just on a drug charge, how do you prove it? It is just not in evidence as per the Indian Evidence Act.
Okay. Okay, so I think that the point is, Aryama, that we have to make this a slightly non-technical debate, because there is the law and that must be supreme, but there is also the public mood. For example, to Bharti's point, there is a strong audience reaction who says, don't agree with Bharti Pradhan. Bollywood is socializing with Pakistani ISI agents, so now it's gone to that level. We've all seen their pictures. Bollywood is indulging in drugs. Why shouldn't they be questioned? I think no one is in the mood. When I say no one, large sections of people are not in the mood to see these people as victims, right? So while we know that 31 million Indians consumed drugs, cannabis in 2018, and many of them were poor, not all of them were rich. Today, there's also a backlash to the elite, Aryama, and that is defining a lot of the narrative around this story. So how do you see these comments?
Well, let me say this, Barkha, I would like it that you put up the other Mr. Khan's question up, because
Yes.
his question actually answers itself. Mr. Khan's question.
Yeah, I'm looking for Mr. Khan's question because there's so many comments. You can read it.
No, but this particular one, which you had just earlier.
Okay,
the question of Mr. Khan's
I see. Yasir Khan's question. Yes, I'm going to look for it. Yes, go ahead. But I'm going
because that question answers itself. He very rightly wants to know whether members, like he says, is there anyone on the panel that actually seeks to hold consumers accountable under the law dash as required? Question mark.
Yes.
Let me answer him. I don't know whether he has fully understood what we have been saying in the manner we have wanted to say it. But according to me, I want to hold the consumers. Yes, Mr. Khan, I do want to hold the consumers accountable under the law as required. And that law makes it a bailable offense. That law treats it as a minor punishment. And I don't want to treat it not under the law, but extra legally and say lynch these people. So to answer Mr. Khan, I want them to be treated and held accountable as per the law, not be held accountable to be lynched, which is not what the law is saying. So I think that answers the question. And that takes it to the second point of what you are saying, Barkha. The second question come up, is this a defense of the elite? Is elite confined, is drug consumption confined to the elite? And is this a backlash against the elite? Let me tell you one thing. I don't know many of you whether you're aware of it, but in many port towns, and I can speak for the Madras port, and I'm going back 20 years as a shipping lawyer, I used to see what was called brown sugar. being supplied and taken on a day-to-day basis by the port dock workers. I've seen the fishermen who have taken this brown sugar because it is much cheaper than alcohol. The fact is that the drug consumption is not restricted to the wealthy. It's not restricted to the elite. And I am saying, yes, treat everybody the same way. Don't treat different people differently. This is not, according to me, a defense of the elite. If you start punishing every consumer, you are going to punish people, a port labor worker, people who are fishermen who are working 20 hours a day and take these drugs. These are people who are also consumers in the same breath. And
Yeah.
obviously, in a country which has a lot of poverty, a country where people are suffering, a country where people, whether you like to believe it or not, a lot of people believe that there's preferential treatment in the country. There's a big difference between what happens to the elite and what happens to the hoi polloi. In such a country, there will be for anything a backlash against the elite. And I don't think the elite can object to it. Let me make it very clear. If that dock worker is caught for consumption of drugs, it's not going to be headlines in the newspaper. But if an elite, a person from the so-called quote-unquote elite society is caught for the consumption of drugs, he is definitely going to be headlines in the paper. If a driver of a truck has an accident and hits somebody, it is not going to be headlines in the paper. But if a person who's in the elite has an accident like that, his name is going to come in the paper. So it is something which the elite have to accept that yes, if they are given a very special position in the society, now that special position carries with it special responsibilities and unfortunately carries with it special handicaps. And one of those handicaps is when the elite does something which transgresses the law, yes, they will be singled out, they will be pointed at, and stones will be thrown on them, and there will be media headlines on them.
Right.
And that's the reality.
Right. I just want to bring in Kaveri at this point because I think Aryama makes, I think, a fair point that, this is the flip side, Kaveri, of being famous. Do you think that this is an inflection point for the film industry? We have forgotten, Kaveri, previous sort of controversies that have taken place, whether it was Salman Khan being tried for culpable homicide, whether it was Sanjay Dutt being tried for, weapons in a Tara case, in a terrorism case. We have male actors like Pratik Babbar who've openly spoken about their drug use. But something feels different about this moment. Something feels very different about the public mood, Kaveri. Do you think there is something very different in the public mood, which is always lionized and eulogized and been smitten by Bollywood? Is it different this time?
Barkha, I definitely think so. And I think it's actually the pandemic has caused it. Bollywood has never been so vulnerable as it is right now. There are no theaters. There's no big Friday where a film will release and, it'll silence all critics. If a Deepika Padukone is picked up for questioning, her film releases next Friday, it's a big hit, people forget about all that has gone before. So I think it's a particularly vulnerable moment for the industry because it doesn't have that big back sort of support of the public, that the public comes and watches our movies. It's the Salman Khan defense. He may have done he may have committed all sorts of crimes or been accused of all sorts of crimes, but his movies still open big every Friday, and people tend to forget what he's been accused of. So that's one. It's a particularly vulnerable moment, and I think people have fed into this mood. People are very emotional about the death of a young star. There's a sense that his life wasn't quite complete, and I think there's a sense of guilt as well, kind of collective guilt that perhaps they didn't give him the kind of attention that they should have. So there's that. But there's also, I think, what I want to bring to your notice, and I think you briefly talked about it when you talked about the mental health debate. I also want to bring to your notice the complete lack of education that we've seen on the part of journalists. I'm sorry to say that, but when you have something like a CBD oil being put on the same level as marijuana, being put on the same level as cocaine, being put on the same level as prescription drugs by educated anchors, that really worries me. And that tells me that while they may be playing to the gallery and they're definitely, echoing what the public feels, there's also that sense that they don't want to educate the public and tell them, look, it's not as morally depraved as you think it is. There is this CBD oil which is used
Yeah.
internationally for calming. There's marijuana, which is legalized in many states in the US, where Shashi Tharoor himself in India has, suggested that it be legalized. So that nuance in the debate is missing because there is this mood. There's a ferocity in
Yeah.
mood out there, and I think that is there because Bollywood is really vulnerable right now. All its movies are going into that graveyard of streaming where every actor is now on the same platform. A Jaideep Alawat could be, at the same level as an Akshay Kumar. You don't have 200 or 300 crores separating them. So
Yeah.
remember, that is what is happening to the industry at this moment.
So I just want Bharti to come in on this. And Bharti, before you react, I want to read out an audience question. Karthik Reddy, this is for the whole panel. If I, as a common citizen, had got questioned, none of these lawyers would have come forward and batted for me and asked about why the NCB was doing what it was. I believe we've got to connect the dots here. So there's this ferocity of the public mood, right? Abha, I'll come to you. Just let Bharti take that and then you can add to that. And Bharti, do you agree with Kaveri that to some extent the film industry has itself to blame? It's been managed for so long by PR agents. Now you have Quan, this talent management agency, at the heart of this controversy. It's almost as if film stars stopped being individuals, they stopped being themselves, they surrendered their narratives to managers. In the years that you have seen the industry, was it always like that? Because I have friends in the industry, and one of my very big arguments with them is, yeah, bolte kyun nahi ho kuch? Why aren't you yourself? Nee, our managers are saying this. Our managers are saying that. So, Bharti, what do you say to that?
First and foremost, I want to agree with Aryaman that you get the brickbats in the same proportion as the bouquets, and you better
Yeah.
be prepared for that. So
Yeah.
that's something that every privileged person should accept, understand, and behave accordingly, because there is a responsibility that comes along with your fame. So you better, you cannot say, why can't I have the same privileges as my neighbor? But he doesn't have the privileges that you have as a celebrity. So, so I do think it cuts both ways, and it's high time people in the film industry and elsewhere, sportsmen or politicians, anybody who's privileged should be ready to be inquisitioned a lot, put on the mat a lot more than a common person. So I
Yeah.
agree with her there. Where Kaveri said, I don't agree with a lot of things, but one thing I agree with her is that it's because of this pandemic there are a lot of unemployed people who had nothing to do for the 6 months since March, and I think they've all turned into mini Sherlock Holmes, looking at that's the employment they've all got, because they're all sitting there looking at photographs, they're looking at video clips, and they're coming to conclusions which the investigating agency should be coming to. So I just think it has a lot to do with unfortunately, with the times we're going through.
There's a question on the live stream saying, no, none of your panelists are addressing that in Bollywood, at Bollywood parties, drugs are served on a table. This has been reported in the media. So the Bollywood demand and supply chain is a serious issue. And I want Bharti to react and then Mr. Banerjee to react to this, because there is a strong perception of okay, right now we're talking about marijuana, but there have always been for years whispers of cocaine in Bollywood and cartels. And I do want our panel to come in on that. I don't want us to seem as if we're glossing over the tough questions here, because we're not. Bharti, you take that first, about the Bollywood parties where cocaine is brought out on trays, apparently.
Right. So, first and foremost, I have to answer something you asked me earlier. Have
Yeah,
times changed, and what was it like before these managers came in?
yeah,
I'm one of the fortunate people. I belong to that generation where we didn't have all these filters between us and the people we were interviewing or interacting with. So we were
yeah,
welcome on the sets. We used to do studio rounds, and we were, we used to go to their houses, in and out of their houses. They would be in our house, we would be in their house. So it was very different, and we got to see them really up close and personal. And I have personally never seen then or now I have never seen drugs on the table. Again, these are your Sherlock Holmeses who are sitting there at home looking at pictures and saying that's a drug. You have a Vicky caution, probably, you can't even touch your nose in a photograph, because if you touch your nose in that video clip, it means you're sniffing. And it doesn't mean you're sniffing because you have a cold, it means you're sniffing because there's substance out there. So I just find it ridiculous. I mean, where are the drugs on the table? I have been to so many private parties. I've been to one even recently. I went even during COVID times. We had a small party of 3 or 4 people where we all sat with masks and social distancing. I found no cocaine anywhere on any table. So I don't know, where is this cocaine? I mean, are you looking at Karan Johar's video clip and saying there's cocaine? Where is the cocaine? I want to know. You have
Okay.
a Vicky, poor fellow just sniffing because he probably was recovering from a cold or dengue, as I heard. So it's silly.
Okay.
Where is the
Yeah, let me argue this from the other way though, and I'll take this to Mr. Banerjee, Aryama, Sundaram, and to Abha. And Mr. Banerjee, you've spoken about the small quantities that have been caught, but there has been, for many people, many officials always have spoken about a Bollywood underworld drug cartel nexus. This is one of those big things that I've been hearing for as long as I've been a journalist. How true is it? How real is it in your experience?
Well, I don't have any experience with the Bollywood, but I think it is an exaggeration to say that drugs are arranged on the table. I don't think anyone is so foolish or so brave to arrange drugs on the table. All these drugs, they are handed over to the individuals surreptitiously. It is not even done openly. I'm quite sure of that. I have, in Mufti, I've gone to some RAV parties, and I've seen that the drugs are given out very surreptitiously. It is not given out openly, even to those who are known. It is just given surreptitiously, hidden and all that. So it is just an exaggeration to say that it is all lying on the table, the drugs are lying on the table. Moreover, so far I've not come across any Bollywood actor or actress who is involved in this drug trade. I can say that, well, they may be consuming and all that, but I don't think, I'm not sure, but I've not come across anyone who is involved in this drug trade.
Okay. Okay. Let me take the same question to Aryama. Aryama, how do you explain the public mood? And can our judges be immune to it? Because the fact is that Riya Chakrabarti keeps getting denied bail. Even today, her remand has been extended, by multiple days, right? And there is such a ferocity, as Kaveri said. There is a ferociousness, and the courts are clearly cognizant of that ferocity of public mood. So how will the law clinically apply itself at this point?
Look, let's accept one thing, but we cannot run away from the fact that drug use is rampant, that drug use has increased over a period of time, that drug use has become a leisure activity amongst the more wealthy. These are facts you cannot run away from. Now, the fact that it is done and it's become common now does not justify it at all. I, for one, while I'm aware that, yes, marijuana has been legalized in various places, there's a medical reason. They say that it's less harmful than alcohol. Fine. They're not talking about marijuana here. Marijuana is just, what is called grass is just a minor part of it. What one is really looking at is much stronger opiate drugs like cocaine and other things. And I don't think any of us can run away from the fact that it has become more and more rampant over the years, not only in India, all over the world. India is one of the sufferers of this, and we have to deal with it. We have to deal with it. We have to stop the supply. We have to stop the smuggling. We have to stop the peddling. We have to deal with it. And therefore, I, for one, am all for dealing with it. That's why I started by saying one thing. If the NCB, in this case, is investigating with these people to find out what is the source, all right, I saw one of the questions put to you. We all know that it happens in Bollywood, etc. I'm not subscribing to it. Assuming it was so, then NCB starting their investigation with Bollywood, saying we understand that it is rampant here. Ergo, we can find out from this and try to trace the source and trace everything. You cannot fault NCB on that. But if the only aim is to go and catch individual consumers, then let the police do their job. This is not a job for NCB to be doing. A Section 27 prosecution is not for NCB, as Mr. Banerjee said. So therefore, I definitely subscribe to the view that the drug menace has to be contained. I definitely subscribe to the view that where we find rampant use of drugs, one has to try to go there to find out what is happening, to stop the supply, to trace the suppliers, to trace the smugglers. I believe that has to be done. And if Bollywood industry is being treated as one place where it's reputedly rampantly used, which is public perception, whether we like it or not,
Yes.
again, I don't find anything wrong with the NCB investigating amongst Bollywood at all. Bollywood is not immune from that investigation. But I hope that they are being investigated as witnesses to find a greater gain and not being investigated for purpose of punishing them under Section 27 alone. That is not the purpose, and that is what I'm hoping NCB is really doing. And if they're doing that, then I can't find fault with what they're doing, and Bollywood is not immune from the investigation.
I'm actually so glad you've said that because, I think that our audience needs to understand that we're not sitting here advocating for drugs. We're not sitting here making the point that, we kind of relate to these fancy parties where cocaine is supposedly, we don't know, served on trays. We're not advocating for that. We realize that marijuana is a deeply addictive substance and hard drugs even more so. And that's why marijuana has often been called a gateway drug. So Aryama, thank you for making that point because some of the questions are about that. And I want to take that to Abha. Abha, are you being too kind? Are you being too kind to these film stars? Because, for example, while Abhilash calls this a COVID behavioral syndrome, as Kaveri referred to, most Indians are overthinking the problem, he says. There is also a question here from Shyamal. And Shyamal says, listening to this conversation, it seems the panel believes everybody is at fault except Bollywood druggies, right from the NCB to the court. So, Abha, I want you to take that because I think what we have to do is separate the strands. There's the law, there's the consumer, there is proportionate punishment, and there is, trying to understand psychologically and sociologically what's happening. So, Abha, please respond to Shyamal, who's saying that this panel is advocating for Bollywood druggies, as he calls them.
Not at all, not at all. In fact, the law should be followed to the hilt. If they are consumers, then there's a punishment up to 6 months. They deserve a bail, which they would. But the bigger issue is drugs is not only in Bollywood, but we go to colleges, institutes. So had NCB come with clean hands, there is something called, you come with it, you approach it with clean hands. NCB came because of the drug chats which were transferred from ED. Had NCB done a raid, recovered quantities of drugs and come in the right manner, nobody would have questioned. But since it has come to bash, and that is why people are looking at it with the suspicion that it has come with a hidden agenda because somewhere Bollywood has been speaking out on national issues, it has been anti-government on certain issues. So that is not the way to stifle freedom of speech and expression. We are all with NCB. We want drugs to be controlled. We want our children to be safe. And who violates the law, then punishment should be proportionate to the law. You cannot harass a person just because his name erupts. You need evidence. If you recover them with drugs, you punish them. But if you don't find drugs on Riya Chakravarti, you just the FIR under 27A and make her a drug trafficker. If she's paying from a credit card, 11,000 rupees makes her a consumer, not a trafficker. We have a problem with NCB putting false charges. We don't have a problem if NCB catches the druggie and punishes them.
Okay, I want to bring in Kaveri now, and I want to actually read the question on the screen. All of you can also see this question. The concern should be why media houses and even the government is giving top priority to this case when we are facing a pandemic. We have many more issues to address: unemployment, the surge in COVID cases, the GDP. Why are we so obsessed with this case? Now, Kaveri, one could be that people just want a relief. They don't want to hear that there's an oxygen shortage. They don't want to hear that there are post-COVID recovery complications. They don't want to hear that 21 million salaried Indians have lost their job. This has become like reality TV. It's happened in other countries also. Remember the O.J. Simpson case? We're revulsed by the car chase here that we saw in Mumbai. There was a car chase even in the O.J. Simpson case. I remember it well.
Absolutely. And I think, people who tend to blame, especially the two channels which are going after the actors, have to acknowledge that their ratings have increased. And that tells you that there is enormous public interest in it. So while I don't agree with what they're doing, I think they're perfectly entitled to do that. What I disagree with is the way it's being done and the way the the lines have been blurred between, as Aryama says, if someone is a witness, if someone is an accused. You look at some of the headlines today, uh, dum maru dum, phas gaye hum, this kind of nonsense which is going on, where every such opportunity is used to use revealing photographs of these actresses. I think it's really tragic, and these are the same actresses and these are the same actors whose movies you'll go and watch when theaters finally reopen. So I think there's a certain amount of perhaps it's because people have had nothing else to do. Perhaps we are essentially a judgmental nation. There's a strong moral core that we hold, and I think we expect all our icons to follow that. Or perhaps it's just the mood of the times that we need. There's a certain Schadenfreude,
Yeah.
we love to see a public reputation in ruins. Just as we love to build up celebrities, we love to tear them down. So it's, I think, a mixture of so many different things. But what there is a tremendous amount of emotion here. And I think no amount of intellectual argument can actually explain it away. There is a public interest in this. People are feeding off it. And if the government sees it as a valuable distraction, why not?
Yeah, and that would be fair politics, right? I mean, if I were a politician, that would be fair politics, right, Kaveri?
Unfortunately, true.
Yeah. Okay. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I need to start taking last comments, and I will try and pick up as many audience comments as I can and ask all of you to make your concluding remarks in response to that. I'll start with you, Bharti. We have Saurav Hazarika saying the sexism that prevails in our country has played a huge part in this episode of Clean Up Bollywood. But there's another very different question from Oro, who says, do we see this as an ideological cleansing of the film industry? Now, one of the things that has confused me is that the film stars have been so keen to please the Modi government. It's not that any of them have, maybe the odd Anurag Kashyap, maybe Deepika Padukone went to JNU, but it's not like she's really ever criticized the government. So, what do you think? Why do you think there's such a need to control and, as I think Kaveri said, tame Bollywood? Bharti, last comments.
I actually am not very sure because I don't see this as an ideological war in the first place. I don't. I don't even subscribe to this whole thing that that they're being taught a lesson because of their ideology. I don't subscribe to that at all because that would mean you're going on a witch hunt and you're being vindictive, or you just wanted a one-sided story to be told. I don't agree with any of this because that's really we'll be just getting into an ideological war for no reason, which is not the topic today. So I don't agree with any of that. I just think there's this great glee, this vulturism in wanting to bring down people who you yourself have put up on a pedestal. For instance, it's not just now. Now it's more because of social media and because everybody's got nothing to do. But there's also, I remember when Sanjay Dutt was caught during that case. That's a 93 ki baat hai. We're talking about 1993. At that time, I remember all the headlines were saying things like Khalnayak, like you said, Dammarudam. They were going on about Khalnayak. They were playing on that title of this film, which was going to be released. And when Khalnayak, they had a premiere at City Fort in New Delhi. I remember they couldn't control the mobs. They just couldn't control them. And similarly, when he came out on bail and we went to Maratha Mandir for Mahesh Bhatt's film, it was raining cats and dogs. It was crowded. The Maratha Mandir was chock-a-block. So there is this, wanting to pull them down at the same time being so enamored. You don't want to even look at them as normal human beings anymore.
Okay, so here's the question. I wonder if that larger-than-life image is finally over for Bollywood. But I think there's a valid question, Abha, in your last comment. The panel may want to take this. Bollywood represents India across the world. People know Indian culture through Bollywood. Huge number of people look up to these actors. You really think they should just be looked as consumers? Like basically the same question. Aren't you being too kind to them? Quickly, Abha.
No, but are they? You can't say that they are consumers. They are human beings, and everybody has follies. But again, as I'm saying, it is Bollywood bashing because of Sushant Singh Rajput case and Bihar elections, and they do not find that as homicide. So that is why it has come. Had it come with clean hands, we would have said yes. If Bollywood is doing drugs, punish them, arrest them. But because you could not put murder in Sushant Singh Rajput's case, because ED could not find those 15 crore rupees, because CBI has kept quiet, you just do not take out drugs because you have failed on certain fronts. That is the question which we are raising. If you feel, in fact, Salman has been arrested in and out in even the Chinkara case. Sanjay Dutt went behind bars. He was arrested. People have gone behind bars. It's not that. But this time, it is absolute witch hunting because a drug chat of 2017 for that NCB makes you sit for 5 hours without any evidence, without any recovery, then definitely we are going to.
Okay, Mr. Banerjee, very quickly, and then Kaveri and Aryama can wrap this up for us. Mr. Banerjee, what would if you were advising the NCB officials who are questioning the stars today, what would your guidance be to them?
I would say that I sincerely hope and I do believe that NCB will be successful in catching some big peddlers, big traffickers who are actually trafficking in, say, quintals, and who are supplying it internationally. I sincerely hope that they do manage.
So you basically want this investigation to go beyond grams to quintals. But Kaveri, the point is that there's a very, according to me, perceptive comment on the screen. And that comment says, why should we complain about this media trial? We're getting what we really crave for, sadistic voyeurism.
I absolutely agree. As we say, we get the government we deserve. We also get the media we deserve. And I think if we feed off it, if we watch it every day, wherever you go, whether you go to hospitals, hotels, restaurants, even now during COVID times, this is all you see being played on the screens. This is all you see or hear being discussed. So we're consuming it as a reality show, as you said. There's no other distraction. I think people have watched everything that there is to watch on streaming services.
Yeah.
This is a show that's it's a gift that keeps on giving, and people are hooked to it. It's the new drug in town, actually.
Okay, that's interesting. Aryama, I'm going to give you the last word. I think you've made a very nuanced argument. You've said you're not for legalizing, decriminalizing marijuana. None of us are sitting here as advocates, but you feel the law must be proportionate. But I think there are valid questions from our audience, and the valid questions are about the iconic status that Bollywood enjoys, and therefore they have to have a greater sense of responsibility.
I, for one, believe in that completely. In fact, that's why I said much earlier that when you take the benefits which come with being a so-called elitist, with that comes the greater responsibility. When you take all the privileges, naturally, if you fail in any way, your failure is going to be much larger, assume greater proportions than the failure of somebody who does not have that iconic status. And definitely this will hit. And what is most important here is the fact that so far as the public is concerned, the public are reacting in a certain way. Since the public are reacting in a certain way, the fact that either the agencies are behaving in a certain way to assuage this public hunger, or the media is reacting to it, or in any other way, other people, other citizens are reacting to it, only goes down to the same thing. It is always the vox populi. The politician is interested in the reaction of the public. The media, of course, is interested in the reaction of the public. In fact, I have often said the media today has become the watchdog of the public. It's become the court of the public, and really reflects what the public wants to say. And I think what you hear, the support for what is being done today, what you're really hearing is, look, there are people who are so enjoying the cream of this society and what it has to give us. If they are enjoying the cream, their responsibility to act responsibly is far, far greater than anyone else. And if they slip, yes, they will be treated more harshly than others who are not taking the cream of our society. And I think that's what you're listening to. That's the reaction you're listening to. And I don't know, left to myself, whether I can fault a theory which says the more privileged you are, the greater responsibilities there are. The more privileges you take from society, the more responsible you have to be to society. And I, for one, do believe that.
And I think that's well said, and I think the entire panel would agree on that one point, that there is great privilege here, and that privilege is expected to be handled with responsibility. And when it's not, there is a collective backlash to it. And I think the mood of the country has also changed. There isn't that kind of forgiving spirit as there once used to be. Even as Salman Khan, who was always forgiven, who was almost romanticized as this bad boy of Bollywood, I think today the image would be much different. But that's only if we get to talking about the men at all. We only seem to be talking about the women non-stop. So I'm also waiting for the story to shift. If it really is about bringing people to account, let's hear some stories about the men as well. In the meantime, thank you to our panel and to our audience. We may not have always agreed, but we've had a very civil conversation. And I think we must, the one thing I would fault my colleagues in the media, do whatever story you want to, but don't shout down other people. I think we can be better than that. Hopefully we've made a start here. Thank you, Aryama, Sundaram, Abha, Mr. Banerjee, Kaveri and Bharti. And thank you to our audience. We'll be back tomorrow with another live stream on a key issue of the day. Goodbye. Thank you very much.